Hi, baby. It was a dark and stormy night. Suddenly, a shot rang out. A door slammed. The maid screamed. Suddenly, a pirate ship appeared on the horizon. While millions of people were starving, the king lived in luxury. Meanwhile, on a small farm in Kansas, a boy was growing up. Part 2. In part 2, I tie all of this together. I've just finished editing chapter 1 of my novel with much guidance from my writing mentor. As I mentioned in my previous vlog, I was awarded a mentorship through the New Zealand Society of Authors, which is also supported by Creative New Zealand. For a first-time aspiring author like myself, the tools, direction and perspectives I've been given from my mentor have been really valuable. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to bring my novel to a much higher standard of quality and readability. This experience has been enriching and challenging and exciting, and I've really enjoyed being pushed to discover my full potential as a writer. I've never been happy with my first few chapters, mainly because they were the first chapters that I wrote when I first started writing, and so they were kind of a brain dump for the characters and the setting. It was nice, but not very engaging for the story and to entice the reader. Fortunately, when I started working with my mentor, we put a lot of effort into chapter 1. I reworked it a few times over, and each revision was a great improvement. The story itself remained the same, but I made a lot of changes. The first thing I did was I changed where the story starts. So the story now drops in a few years later than I had originally planned, when there is more action happening, which meant that I had to say goodbye to about 12,000 words.
12,000 words?
But I'm actually really happy with that. Basically, I had to say goodbye to the whole first section of my book and goodbye to a lot of backstory and character development. And instead, I've had to be cleverer about the way that I introduce the characters and tease their backstory and their dynamics to ensure that the details serve the overall storyline. For example, I didn't need to show the happier times in order to contrast with the more challenging times. I could just drop in small details that would infer that these circumstances were not normal, not usual or expected. I'm very happy to be letting go of so much of the beginning of my story. It feels right, it fits so much better, and I feel a lot more confident with the way that the story starts. And yet the parts that have been cut out were not written for nothing. They served their purpose and helped me to get to know my character. And it was just kind of part of the process, really. I've been able to pick bits from it, the bits that I still really like, that are relevant to the story and help me to flesh out the setting. But losing a big chunk of the beginning is actually a great weight off my shoulders. It was about finding the right place to start the story and move it along from there. As for the chapter structure, I've learned quite a lot about that as well. My chapters were fairly short, so I have lengthened them so there are fewer chapters, and each chapter now has a more engaging opening and a stronger ending to propel the reader to the next chapter. So that makes me feel more confident as well. Goodbye adverbs. I really love adverbs. They're like these little flourishes in my writing, and they're a very direct way of conveying a character's emotion or the atmosphere, but they can easily be overdone, and it's quite a lazy technique for telling instead of showing. And if the characters and the scenes have been built well, then the reader will already have an impression of the general vibe. I'd already been considering my overuse of adverbs after reading Stephen King's On Writing, Funny story about this book. I already mentioned it in one of my previous videos that I was reading it, and I haven't actually finished it yet, but I was really enjoying it, and I had it on loan from the library, but it was on loan, so there were people waiting for it after me, and I left it until the absolute, well, I was reading it the week before it was due, and day before it was due, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have to actually try and finish it that night, but I just got really busy and I had to return it so that the next person could get it from me. And then that same day in New Zealand, lockdown was announced, that we were moving into level 3, I think it was at that stage, and all the libraries shut down. And I thought, well, I guess I'm just going to have to try and quickly finish it and then drop it through the return slot. But when we went into full-on lockdown, they weren't accepting returns anymore, so it just worked out so well. And of course, we've been in lockdown for however many days it's been, like 5-6 weeks or whatever, and I still didn't get around to actually finishing it, so I must do that before the libraries open again. Anyway, so adverbs, let me come back to that. Stephen King doesn't really use adverbs, and it's something that I'd never really noticed before. He says in this book, adverbs are not your friend. I will just read a couple of excerpts from it. Consider the sentence, he closed the door firmly. It's by no means a terrible sentence, at least it's got an active verb going for it, but ask yourself if firmly really has to be there. You can argue that it expresses a degree of difference between he closed the door and he slammed the door, and you'll get no argument from me. But what about context? What about all the enlightening, not to say emotionally moving, prose which came before he closed the door firmly? Shouldn't this tell us how he closed the door? And if the foregoing prose does tell us, isn't firmly an extra word? Isn't it redundant? There are a few pages on this, and he gives another example. Just to make sure we all know what we're talking about, examine these 3 sentences. Put it down, she shouted. Give it back, he pleaded. It's mine. Don't be such a fool, Jekyll, Utterson said. In these sentences, shouted, pleaded, and said are verbs of dialogue attribution. Now look at these dubious revisions. Put it down, she shouted menacingly. Give it back, he pleaded abjectly. It's mine. Don't be such a fool, Jekyll, Utterson said contemptuously. The 3 latter sentences are all weaker than the 3 former ones, and most readers will see why immediately. I've read a majority of Stephen King novels, and I'd never really noticed the absence of adverbs. Since then, I've been considering how I can illustrate a scene without using adverbs as a crutch. And of course, my writing mentor picked up on the excess adverbs in my writing. Some of them were really great words, but they served little purpose. So I either resentenced, I either rephrased the sentence, added a minor detail, or I just chopped it out altogether. And now I can move through the rest of the chapters, the rest of my novel with that consistency. Getting to know my main character. I have dedicated a notebook just to my main character, and I've started writing a lot of notes about his likes, wants, needs, dislikes and fears, internal goal. Ooh, pretty. That is so trippy. So that is all helping me to develop the character arc and to make sure that his actions and behaviors and drivers, motivation, his choices and his reactions are all authentic and consistent. And of course, identifying his goals and dreams and the stakes and the obstacles along the way. So just getting that really clear in my mind. Now I've almost finished chapter 2 as well, I've been working on that with my mentor, and I just had to make a few revisions to that as well. I only have a couple of question marks which I might actually move away from and address later, and I'm currently working on chapter 3. So by doing all of this work in chapter 1, I'm now able to apply all of those same techniques and revisions and improvements on the rest of my book moving forward. So that makes me feel really excited and optimistic and motivated. The feedback that I've been getting, particularly the suggestions, recommendations, ideas, tips, techniques, and corrections, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I really need and I really want. It's incredibly valuable to me. I can't even say enough how grateful I am to have this opportunity. I want the gritty stuff. I want the stuff that pushes me and challenges me and tells me you can do this better, because I know I can. I know I can if I'm guided and pushed and shown the way. But occasionally when there's a little bit of praise that slips through, it's like, oh, cool, I think I got this. It's really encouraging. I'm more certain than ever that I want to be a writer. And it's quite a big deal for me, because it's not that I'm necessarily planning to be a full-time writer, because I have other jobs that I'm committed to and that I love, but I'm very certain that I want to be a writer, and I have all of the resources that I need to get there. And like I said, I'm just beyond grateful for that. I'm very aware of what a privileged position I'm in, and I can't thank everyone around me enough for the encouragement and support and guidance that I've been given. I'm excited to see where this editing process will take my book, and of course get it out into the world to share with you guys. It was a dark and stormy night. Your new novel has a very exciting beginning. Thank you. Good luck with the second sentence.